It is now 6 o'clock. We will go ahead and get started. My name is AJ Bush, and I am the pastor to the people in Gillette, Wyoming at First United Methodist Church. And I've had the great privilege of working with an amazing team on this Leadership Excellent Report for the Mission Shaped Future. So we're so happy that you are all here and excited to share this report with you this evening. So before we begin, though, would you please join me in a word of prayer? Holy God, on this day after Pentecost, we pray that you would pour your Spirit out upon us gathered here and pour your Spirit out upon our area. As we strive to do this new thing, would you continue to guide us and lead us and be with us as we have these holy conversations and these holy dreams for what your Spirit can be doing in our area. God, for all of the leaders and the leadership within our conference, both lay and clergy, we give you thanks for all that they do and for all that they will continue to do in the future. Be with us tonight and be in our conversation. In your name we pray. Amen. So I'd like to invite Young Suk to start us off. We will be looking at the report now, if we want to get that up on the screen.
Okay.
And Young Suk will start us off.
Yeah, sure. AJ, would you say a few words about the leadership development in relationship to the entire process?
Yes, thank you. I have it on my notes right here and I skipped it. So we have been working, this team has been working on this document for leadership development and leadership excellence. And this is primarily a directional document. So this is not going to be legislative, something legislative that we will vote on at annual conference. It's not necessarily prescribing certain things that will or will not happen, but instead it's providing direction and vision and guidance for the new leadership development kind of team that will be part of the organizational structure. So even though it's not legislative, it is still important, as leadership development is one of the key areas that we are striving for in our new conference, and this will really help our new leadership development team in their direction and their movement going forward. So just a little bit of context about what this document is, that it is directional and visional, and that it will not be legislative at annual conference.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. So as those of you who are on the call may know, the Mission Shaped Future has 6 working teams. So those 6 include leadership development, leadership excellence, and then congregational excellence, and then clergy excellence, and then communications, and then assets, property, and legal. So did I name all 6? So of those 6, 3 working teams reports are legislative, and then 3 others are not. Those who are not legislative are leadership, congregational development, and then communications. So our report is one of the 3. So so Hannah, let's go ahead and then share the screen of the PowerPoint.
Okay, so can you see it okay?
Yeah, and then this one is, okay, here you go. All right. So are you gonna control? Can you go to the next? All right, so yeah. So the why of leadership excellence? So, why do we develop leaders within the Mountain Sky Conference? So we are giving 4 reasons. First one is to build up the body of Christ, according to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 12. Paul says that it is biblical. I mean, it is scriptural to build and equip the saints, people for the work of ministry, which is to build up the body of Christ. And then second, create and encourage and nurture God's call in our lives, church, community, in the world. And then third, to cultivate and strengthen and utilize the spiritual gifts God has given us. And then finally, to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So these are the why of leadership excellence.
So our next section here is on priorities for leadership excellence. And one of the questions that we asked ourselves as a group is, what are excellent leaders supposed to be doing? I recently became a pastor not too many years ago, and I remember sitting at my desk like in the first few months going, what am I actually like supposed to be doing? What are these priorities that I'm supposed to have as a leader and as an excellent leader? So that was one of the questions that we really wanted to dive into within our group, and we got feedback from several different areas on what some of those priorities would be. So we have a list, but I'm just going to lift up a couple. Actually, this second one here on the screen, I think this one is really exciting, especially the last two words there, that we are recognizing, encouraging, and developing people's God-given gifts for ways that they can use those meaningfully, both inside and outside the church. So as the church, we do not exist, just for ourselves or for our own betterment, but we exist to transform the world. And so what would it mean to develop leaders, whether they're leading our committees, in the local church, or whether they are out in the world using those God-given gifts to make a difference in the world. So I was really excited about that, priority as a leader, to go out and to be able to encourage and develop others to use those gifts in ways that not only transform our church, but transform the world. So if we'll go down to the next slide, you can take a look at these. That first one on this slide, again, equipping others. I think that's a key priority for us to be able to make disciples. We need to be able to equip others and share in that leadership. So as leaders, it doesn't just fall on our shoulders, but that we actually can equip others to be leaders as well. So these were some of the priorities that we wanted to lift up as we look at excellent leadership within our new conference.
So you're kicking it over to me, AJ?
Yes, it's all you.
Good evening. My name is Mike Moore, and I'm a member at Mountain View United Methodist Church in Boulder, Colorado. And it was a pleasure to serve on this committee. And we focused on the strategies for identifying, cultivating, and deploying leaders. And our committee felt that the starting point for this was really the local church. And this was true for both lay and ordained leadership. So in discussing this, we came up with 7 strategies and ideas for developing and strengthening a local church's ability to identify and cultivate new leaders. As AJ mentioned in her opening comments, this is not a step-by-step approach to this, but what we'd hope to do is just create some guidelines and directions to help orient us as we focus on leadership excellence. And the first bullet that you can see there, really our direction must be to view leadership as a key aspect of discipleship, and to make sure it's inclusive of all ages within the church, especially our youth. The second bullet there, since local churches already have many groups and committees and ministries underway, there's an opportunity to both identify and cultivate leaders from these groups, as well as to introduce leadership development to these individuals in those groups. So we thought this was a way to, get in step with some of the rhythms of the church as it operates today. Thank you. The next bullet, creating a culture of ongoing growth and development. Much like the bullet above, we felt it was important to create this culture. And the key to leadership is really providing regular opportunities to build and grow leadership skills. The next bullet was experimenting with new ways of cultivating leadership. And during our discussions, we found that many churches have developed unique and innovative ways to cultivate leaders. we'd heard about some mentoring programs or new ways of finding leaders to serve in church administrative council roles. And what we thought would be important would be to gather these programs together, make sure they get communicated, and this process of experimentation really be supported throughout our conference. Of course, there are several leadership opportunities that already exist within our church, and we need to reinforce and encourage participation in these programs. Examples for the laity would be like the certified lay minister and certified lay servant programs. Other development opportunities exist outside the church, and these should be encouraged as well. The next bullet here, really, it was interesting. We had a lot of discussion about this and expanding the concept of leadership beyond the traditional definition to include new ways to engage leadership we thought was important. Specifically, we thought that the servant leadership model provided an excellent approach to offering a fresh perspective on what leadership in the church really means. We believe that leadership excellence can be guided by meaningful practice of servant leadership. And in the appendix, in what we did, we provided an overview of what this servant leadership model was. The next bullet, actually for that, I will turn it over to Reverend Karen McRae to finish up this section.
Thank you, Mike. Karen McRae. I serve the people in Cody, Wyoming, parts of the Bighorn Basin, and the United Methodist Church in Cody. And Hannah, I thank you. If you will move all the way to Appendix 2, and I think that's probably the very end of the PowerPoint. I appreciate that. I'm just addressing Appendix 2. Thank you. So we focused upon the process towards licensed or ordained ministry. We are not focusing so much on deploying, maybe not our area as much. We have the framework of structures for support and accountability. So both of those continue from the time a person first senses a call to the church's confirmation of that call at each step. And thank you, Hannah. Yes, I'm ready to move. Slide 2. And so those are just some of those points along the way where a person has an opportunity to express her call, express his call, and then the structures that are already in place from the ministry setting, whether that's local church or otherwise, on through to the District Committee on Ministry or the Board of Ordained Ministry. We'll move to the next slide. And then I'm just looking at that last phrase just below the line. So if the person's call toward pastoring is confirmed along the way, at each step along the way, then we continue with those with the flow, I'll say, that the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry has given us, that flow of fitness, readiness, and effectiveness. And so we'll look at the next slide. For folks who sense a call along the licensed local pastor track, and again, as that call is confirmed, these are some of the places where the person can be shaped toward excellence. Next slide, please. For folks who sense a call toward the ordained ministry, then these are some of those places where that pastoral formation, the shaping toward excellence continues. Yes, thank you, Hannah. We have the perspective, we see that excellent leadership for clergy presumes minimum expectations for effectiveness. We know that those are currently expressed by the Board of Ordained Ministry, and so we expect that expression of those minimum expectations to continue. We have the twin poles, I'll say, or the aspects of a clergy person's character and competencies, best practices for that clergy person. Again, there are these networks for support and accountability. And we're clear that the primary process for assessing a clergy person's effectiveness is the annual pastor, staff, parish clergy assessment. Right now, that's our primary process. We don't see as the budgeting process for pastoral compensation or the appointment advisory process. We don't see those two as ways to assess a person's effectiveness, though sometimes there's an undertone of that. And I think now I turn this over to Todd. Thank you, Hannah. One more slide and I'll make sure I'm out of here. Yes, thank you.
And this is going to be very short. This 8-year assessment is a new mandate that was put in place by General Conference a couple of years ago. And the idea of this is to recognize the reality that one of the things we haven't acknowledged in the life of the church is that a call comes, and that call may shift and change over the lifetime of a person. That a call to parish ministry may not be something that someone carries for, that may be a call for a season, not for a lifetime. And so the invitation and the expectation of the General Conference is that every 8 years, all of the clergy people in the conference will be enabled, given a space to listen and grow and evaluate whether that call that they experienced back when they were 25 is still the one they're feeling called to do when they're 45. And as we reflected on that, we realized that that was just a sort of a natural way to think about ministry as it is any career. And it's a natural way to think about ministry as it is any aspect of our lives. We are called to do some things for a season. So the assessment process will be a way of acknowledging that, of helping support clergy in that, and ideally we will find a way to do something similar for the lay folks, especially those who are in positions of leadership in our churches, rather than sort of operate with that quiet expectation that they'll stay in the position they are until they die or retire, because that isn't the way life works for most of us anymore. So that is sort of our aspiration, to continue to work to that direction. I'm not sure who's coming back now.
Thank you, Todd and Mike and Karen. Hannah, we're going to go back up to where it says strategies for supporting leaders. So I hope that you saw there in that section that we see the local church is really where this call to leadership comes from the ways that the local church uses ministry and the groups that are there to call leaders and equip leaders, to use some of the training programs that already exist, to have the local church be in which both lay and clergy leaders are called out of. And then if a person is sensing that call to clergy leadership, then we have that separate process that we just went through for the clergy. So we really see the local church as being that place where we can call and equip leaders. But now we're going to move to the conference. So from local church to the conference level, what can the conference do to help support leaders and help us as we are working to grow ourselves and working to equip other leaders? What can the conference do? And this is by no means an exhaustive list by any means, but this is just some things that we thought were important and some things that kind of kept coming up in our conversations over and over again that we wanted to make sure, again, we're in this vision and in this general direction that the conference is moving. So we can go down to the first three. So these first three bullet points all have to do with, for me, this culture of learning or this culture of continuing growth. So the first bullet point there, that the conference would provide leadership development for people. Oh, I think this is not the right slide. I'm on a slide that says provide regular opportunities is the first bullet point.
No, that's AJ.
Is that the right slide?
No, that's the right slide.
AJ,
Okay.
if I may, AJ, I think we are moving directly to next steps. I think you're correct.
So develop, go ahead.
Okay, so there seems to be some slides missing. That's okay, I will just talk about it. So the strategies, which is in the report, if you pull it up, The first one is that the conference should provide regular opportunities for high quality leadership development. And this is back to that culture of growth, that providing leadership development that is accessible using technology, Zoom for those who are in faraway places, and also accessible time-wise for youth or parents with families, make sure we're accessible for all of that leadership development. Learning from those outside of the church, so leadership development within business communities, and then providing support for professional development. So as I said, those are all about this kind of culture of growth that we want to establish. That there's this idea sometimes as leaders, we think, oh, well, we've got it all. We're leaders now, like we don't need to learn anything new. But this idea that we are always learning and always growing and always have that opportunity to learn something new. And then the last 3 points of this section, I think really have to do about living into our mission rather than living into administration or kind of numerical measures, but really asking ourselves, are we living our mission to create leaders, to transform the world, rather than spending all of our time worrying about the numbers and the administrative priorities. So the last 3 on the report were: be willing to let go of administrative priorities that no longer contribute to the health of people and congregations, be less focused on numerical measures or outcomes, and then create space and opportunities for local churches to experiment and to risk and have it be okay to fail, but that they are willing to experiment and try some of these new ways of ministries. So creating this culture at the conference level that allows local churches to live into their mission and not just be kind of sending in their reports and the administrative duties. Okay, so now we are at the next steps. So Young-Suk and I are going to tag team this one and go through these next steps. Again, this document is providing some direction for the new leadership development team. So these were next steps that we thought could be accomplished by that team specifically. So the first one is to develop the goals and objectives for that team, for the leadership development team, and specific action steps for them to achieve.
And then we will look at the current leadership development programs that we have in both conferences, and then assess them, and then develop a comprehensive leadership resource program. So we have quite a few programs that we have, including coaching, preaching academy, academy for young clergy, and cultural competency training, and so forth. But we will look at them and then do an assessment to develop a more fitting leadership resource program for the new conference.
The next one is to develop a list of behaviors that represent the vision, mission, and values of the conference. So this really comes out of the Board of Ordained Ministry, but we want it also to be applicable to laity, as well as kind of what are some of the behaviors and characteristics that are required for future leadership. So one example would be, risk-taking, being able to take risks. What are some of those characteristics and behaviors that we're specifically looking for in leaders?
Yeah, and then we just have a few more. So next one is to create a culture of congruent. You may ask, okay, what is this? When I saw the Great Plains Conference website, then I learned this as one of the best practices. It is not that we have to reinvent the wheels in every matter. So why not adopting one of the best practices? So we like to create a culture of congruent, working with the Board of Ordained Ministry and the Board of Laity. So what it is that so what is creating a culture of call? It means that the behaviors and beliefs and attitudes of people, congregations and community, readily supports the members of the community to identify and explore call by God to serve God as a lay, clergy, licensed or ordained person. So not just for the church, but also for the community. So this is going to be designed to provide churches and campus ministries and organizations in the Mountain Sky Conference with resources to increase people's imaginations in cultivating the culture of call. So we will design a grant program maybe twice a year or 3 times a year. So you will learn more about this.
And the next one is really about trying to just be very intentional and inclusive in our leadership development. So, you know, as a church, we strive to provide opportunities for all people, right? For young people, for college students, for laity, for clergy. And, you know, sometimes we as a church struggle with that. We kind of have this hierarchy that kind of forms, and certain groups sometimes get left out. But we want to be really intentional about that going forward to make sure that everybody feels like they are getting what they need in their support and have opportunities to be leaders. So it's this cradle to grave, this kind of arc of leadership that everyone along whatever life stage we're providing for them and their leadership.
You know, one of the elements that is very critical in the new Mountain Sky Conference plan is assessment and evaluation across the section. So likewise here, we like to develop a way to assess and evaluate of leadership development and the leaders that are adaptable to diverse contexts across the Mountain Sky Conference. And we all know that we are diverse in terms of geography and ethnicity and gender in many other ways.
Great. So that is the end of the report. Everything that was on these slides is in the written report. So if you want to go back and look at any of that, you can pull that up on the website. It's all in our written report. And now we're just going to open it up for questions, for comments, for feedback, and I will be facilitating that, but our group will be able to answer your questions together. So what questions?
Then may I add to say, if you rather write your questions on the chat box, then we will monitor that as well.
Yes, thank you.
AJ, if I could introduce myself, my name is Amy Gerhardt, and I'm the new Senior Executive of Transition and Conference Culture, AKA the transitional leader that was in the Wimberley report, and just joined the staff this past week and have just been inundated, as you can imagine, with all this good reading material and the town halls, and y'all have done great work. I want to affirm as an outsider how appreciative I am of the good thinking that has been put into this report and the guidance that you're giving the church in the area about the importance of leadership for both laity and clergy. One of the comments I wanted to make was in Appendix 1. I was really appreciative of that overview of the servant leader and the special indicators you have of servant leadership. And one of the things that I thought of was how that list at the very beginning of Appendix 1, I don't know, Hannah, if you can bring that up, but there's a list of indicators of proof, if you will, or the best test as you relate it, of servant leadership. And one of the questions I had was there some thought in developing these questions and indicators into the assessments of clergy, into perhaps the profiles that congregations and clergies put together for the cabinet? And in other words, I'm hoping that these important ideas and these questions kind of leap off the page and find themselves in conversations and consultations, because I think they're really valuable.
Yes, thank you. First of all, welcome. We're so glad that you're here and that you were able to join us tonight. Yes, we have talked about the importance of kind of incorporating this into, annual clergy reviews, some of that kind of stuff, the work that the BOM is doing. We've been in conversation with Kathy Kelsey in the Rocky Mountain Conference, and we have thought about, you know, how do we kind of incorporate this into some of the framework that's already there. So servant leadership was one model that we thought was really important, and so I'm glad you appreciate that. But any of the kind of assessment things, even what congregational development that group has done, any sort of those like kind of markers that we want to be part of our culture, we would want to integrate those into that fabric as you described.
Great. And just one other comment related to the culture of call. The GBHEM has the Young Clergy Initiative, and for 2 quadrennia now have awarded hundreds of thousands of dollars of grants to annual conferences that have figured out some creative ways to develop this culture of call. So just want to make sure to note that not only that we might be a recipient, but a contributor to some of the visions that come out of this conference. And they've got a pretty well-developed grant process, so that we might not have to replicate or have to create something from the beginning, but like Young Suk said, borrow some best practices from others. So just another model that you might want to look at.
Actually, Amy, Young Suk, Hannah, can you, I think you can kick this off. Actually, the Rocky Mountain Conference has received a grant from the GBHM 2 years ago. And then that is the Academy for Young Clergy.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful.
Yes. So we were one of the first recipients 2 years ago.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good news.
We don't lose the opportunity.
Yeah. Never pass up an opportunity to find money.
Thank you for bringing that up, though.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Others, comments, questions? How about what would you add? When you think about leadership, what is your priority? What would you add? Anything?
Jeff Babb, clergy.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I've been in the BOM for years, and the DCOM for years, and as a chair of the DCOM. So you covered the bases really well. I think this pretty much summarizes what we've been doing, what we've been up to. So as we've been thinking about the whole shift and the whole move to focus things down onto a local level, to a lay level, I've been trying to figure out, how do you actually make disciples? How do you make leadership come up within the ranks of laity? Because we're really not good at this. CLMs and CLSs, and we don't do a good job with that at all. So there's a divide between clergy and laity that's always been there. And so the question is, how do we take the system of the top here that was just laid out well, and how do we define that for a layperson who's sitting in a pew in a little church in the middle of nowhere, who is not growing so well? And we're told there's leadership possibilities within their midst, but we're not really, I don't think we're really giving them something they can hang on to or understand or do. And I think it's found in storytelling, which isn't a new idea. It's been around since the 70s.
Are you finished with your question? I'm hearing some other noise. So, thank you, Jeff, for the question. I would turn you to is it Congregational Vitality? What's the name of the other team? Congregational Vitality team, their report, because they did a whole section on discipleship, if you haven't seen it, and kind of what are some marks of discipleship and how do we create disciples within the local community. And we actually had that in our report originally, and we kind of cut it out because we didn't want to duplicate what the other group was working on. So we are assuming that same kind of model of this is how we can create disciples, and it's the Wesleyan Discipleship Cross. Has 4 quadrants for kind of how do we create disciples. And so then Mike, if you want to add anything here, but in the section that Mike went over, this idea that implementing that into into small groups or into things that are going on at the church, creating a sermon series around it, and just different ways to do that within the local church to help build those disciples. And then one other thing, I think, if you know the organizational structure of the new position of the kind of resource person for local congregations, that might be another person that can help local congregations in doing exactly what you're describing, Jeff. So if anybody else wants to jump in from the team, welcome to do so.
Hey Jay, this is Jerry Krause. I'm on the guide team. Jeff and I met a couple of years ago. I think I'm a layperson from Littleton, and one of the things that we are doing, you've got to start in the local church itself. And so we have events that take place. We have what we're calling Homecoming Sunday, which will be close to September as people return from vacations and so forth. So we have created a team to develop the plans for that weekend and what they're going to be, and tie it in with the sermon that Reverend Trudy Robinson will be preaching and so forth. And in my mind, that's where it starts. The local churches have to take the responsibility to start creating leaders within their church, and then pay attention to that and take those leaders and put them in charge of committees, and then take those committee chairmen and put them in charge of the main committees within the church, and then get them involved in the circuit, get them involved in the district activities that are going on. So it grows from the roots. It grows from the church.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comment.
AJ, I have a, I'd like to turn to Andy Millman. I believe Andy, are you on the call? I think you are, Andy. Andy Millman? Maybe he's away. Okay. Oh, Andy. Yes. One of the next steps is to be intentional about supporting the leadership development of youth and campus ministry. So I'd like to ask Andy to address what we are doing and then what we will continue to do in terms of developing young people, young leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad, Jeff, you asked a question because I was thinking a similar thing. It's very important for us to specifically name.
Can you increase the volume?
Yeah, it's as high as it goes.
Okay.
There we go. Lay leadership development is just as important as our clergy leadership development. And so a lot of that is happening through our things like CCYM, through our campus ministries, and we are intentionally empowering our young people in those spaces to really take on more of a leadership role. Instead of being directed what to do, we're empowering them to do that activity and to learn how to lead by doing. I would love to see more opportunities for young adults, and a lot of that is through our campus ministries. I'm right now working to develop more opportunities for that with young adults, but we're looking at how we can engage leadership in the spaces that they're already in with our young people, because young people are leading right now and are doing things outside of our traditional models of church that we can learn from, and we can increase our vitality through.
Thank you, Andy.
This is Emily Hagan. I have a couple of questions around the whole process, but it really relates when you talk about youth as a specific example. We have a youth group, we have leaders, and we have had people go to CCYM and participate. We had a youth on CCYM come to our church and give a presentation because of the petition that they brought at annual conference for their voice being heard in terms of inclusivity. So I feel like our local churches doing as much as we can, but we don't get information timely enough to have participation in the events. We don't have a good sense of the calendar. If you look on the calendar right now, there are no youth events for the fall. I know that's not true, but it's not on the calendar. So I think that there's a big gap between the conference level offerings and the communication to local churches. And I know get a bigger locality and more congregations, it's even more important to have better communication. So I think we have a lot to offer, but communicating those things in a timely manner and really far enough in advance that people can plan for them is something that I think needs to increase. Just in all of the ways that you're talking about leadership development, that's something missing. And then for the big picture, so not necessarily specific to youth, but for the big picture, I think that this plan is great, but it doesn't have a lot of timely and specific aspects. The only time frame that I saw were the 8-year, the reevaluation of clergy every 8 years. And so the only thing that I would say for the plan is just to have more specific timeline in place so that there's a sense of how often are the circuits going to be involved, how regular is nice, but that could be every 20 years. So I think it's better to have a better timeline laid out for some of the specific leadership development aspects that you're talking about.
Thank you, Emily. I wrote down the issue of communication. That is always an important thing, to be able to communicate. And then for specifics, our hope is that the new leadership development team of the new conference will be able to take this and then put in some of those details, but I will also make a note about that as well. So thank you.
So this is Margaret. Just wanting to talk about the laity again. You mentioned the lay servant program and the certified lay ministry program, which I think are important. United Methodist Women also have a really great training program with training every year for districts and as well as the conference. And then you add Mission U onto that, and we involve a lot of people, hundreds of people every year in training, which they take back to the local church then. So I just wanted to mention that, as many of this things apply to clergy more than the laity.
Yes, how could we forget United Methodist Women and all the wonderful things they do? Yes, there are so many wonderful opportunities that the church provides, and that's part of like wanting to create this kind of resource and one of the next steps about, you know, what is all offered and how do people know about it, so we can have kind of that comprehensive knowledge. But thank you for lifting up UMW. And I think, Youngsuk, I think there was one question in the chat. That I saw come through. Is that true?
Oh, I don't see that on my screen. So can you, Hannah, do you see it?
I got it right here, actually. So it's from Amber. She says, spiritual direction is a necessary resource for equipping healthy, effective, excellent leaders, both lay and clergy. And she says it was not explicitly listed, Amber, so you did not miss it, but I definitely would put it under, this was the section that got left out of the PowerPoint. And in that list, we had coaching, peer learning circuit groups. So I would have I'll put that spiritual direction as something that definitely can be utilized to equip leadership. So thank you for lifting that up as well. Okay, are there any
I have
other
another question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I know that we have had, as an example, the Preaching Academy in Colorado Springs. With the new conference structure, would that be in a different place, or how would that look?
Thank you for the question, Emily. Actually, now AJ and I are in Salt Lake City, Utah right now to take a leadership development training here. And then I just was reminded myself of a plan that we were going to implement and in which we didn't get to do. That is, when we invite a preacher or a professor, a speaker for the Preaching Academy, one of the ideas that we had was, okay, with the same people, kind of a traveling tour. So maybe one in Springs, one in Salt Lake City, like one in Wyoming and or one in Montana. So at least 3 places, so which we didn't get to implement yet, but then here, just sitting in Salt Lake City, Utah right now, I just thought about that today, actually. So thank you for the question. So I'm just reminding myself, okay, do not forget. So Emily, please hold us accountable. So please remind us again, okay?
Young Suk,
Yes.
this is Sue. Hi.
Oh, yes. Hi, Sue.
Yeah, and I, what you just said about the having the academies or whatever in different areas matches with kind of what the ELCA does in Montana, and brings in someone really good, and they'll do it at least in 2 different areas in Montana, so that so that not so many people are moving. If you can get people to agree to do something for over a week period of time or something, and be on tour, go on the road.
Yes, exactly.
It really seems to work well for them. So I would, that might be a resource for you as you look at how you would set those kinds of things up.
Okay, thank you. You and I can talk a little more. Yeah. We can learn from them.
And the other thing on the spiritual direction, we have hosted the Academy for Spiritual Formation from the Upper Room up here twice now, and it's a 5-day academy, and we may have been doing those down there too, but I really
many years, yes.
Yeah, that those are such wonderful things to keep encouraging.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue.
Yep.
Yeah, accessibility for that type of training or for those opportunities is definitely one of the priorities, whatever that may look like, whether it's, more Zoom meetings or traveling or different locations. I mean, definitely accessibility is one of the priorities, especially for the large geographical area. So we'll keep working on that. And I see another question here that just popped up. This is a young person question. Interested in knowing how many young people utilize training opportunities such as UMW, Mission U, lay servant. One thing I see in the University of Wyoming is the number of students who go to seminary at a local church. I don't exactly know what that means, but does anybody, so other people on the call, if the person who asked the question wants to clarify that last part, but if other people on the call, does anybody know how many young people utilize like UMW, Mission U, lay servant training, any of that kind of thing?
I can talk about UMW a little bit. The last several years, we've hosted 25 young people, young women, at the annual spiritual retreat. And even that kind of event, I think, gives some training. So that is, they only pay a $25 fee for the entire weekend. The UMW covers the rest of the cost. So that's what they do. We do have a young adult and a youth on board of laity. Hopefully they will be working with people. I haven't heard from them for several months now, but I know they have lots of plans to be involved with other young people. Don't know how many are attending the lay servant program, but I know that there has been an interest in that by the young people.
And I'll say just with Mission U, there has been some intentionality there as well. I know I've worked with the gullies to try and figure out some ways. The biggest challenge is finding time when we can get our young folks away from everything else. But yes, we are working actively on that.
Yeah, it comes back to that accessibility piece and whether it's at a time that's accessible for people. I hope that answered your question. Is there anyone else? Oh, chat comes back up.
AJ, there is a reply from Olga.
Yes, seminary is an LDS program and is required for the young people. Could be a different use of that word, seminary. Other questions? All right, well, if there are no other questions, thank you everyone for all of your great feedback, for your input. Again, thank you to the team for putting this together, and it's really been a fruitful time, and we look forward to getting some of these things implemented and being intentional, especially in the areas where, you know, we haven't, like I said, with laity and young people, it's always a challenge, but we want to be very intentional about that going forward. So thank you again all for being here. And is there anything else that I'm forgetting, anyone? If not, I will close this in prayer, but I just want to make sure everybody has had their chance to make sure we get everything in. Good? Okay, well, if you join me in prayer, we will close together. God, we thank you for this time to be in discussion and discernment about the best ways that we can provide leadership for your church. God, tonight I would just pray a blessing over all people within our congregations and within our communities and within our conference. God, that they would all be able to know your call in their life, and that they would all be able to be encouraged and empowered and be able to access those places and those opportunities and those things they need to live out that call. God, help us to be partners with you as we help each and every one of us follow our call from you. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Good to see you
AJ.
all.
Good
Bye
job.
now.
Thank you. Thank you, Marv.
Bye now. Thanks,
Bye.
Youngchuk.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.